So, hi everyone. My name is Jessie Littlejohn. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Director of Operations for More Light Presbyterians. And um, as we continue to let people in, this is just a reminder if this is your first time coming to a More Light Monday conversation, welcome. We're so glad that you're here and that you registered and are wanting to be a part of this conversation. As Claudia mentioned, this is a very rich topic. We want to take advantage of the time. Um, and if it's your first time, the format is very simple. We have a beginning portion that our two board members will kind of lead us in a presentation, lecture-y kind of style um, piece, and that is all recorded and able to be viewed later. Normally, after we do that portion, we cut off the recording so that we can maintain protection and anonymity for those who are trying to ask questions. This is a completely judgment-free zone. We want you to come with your curiosity and with your genuine questions. This is not a space that we will allow for disrespect or anything of that sort. But we also want to protect that this is a very serious topic and that there's a lot of scarce there's people who are scared. It's real. But because of the nature of this topic, we really do believe that the Q&A portion of this is going to be very rich. And so we are asking that for this recording only, we are going to leave the recording on the entire time. If in the Q&A portion you do not want to be on camera or have your voice heard on the recording, please put your questions in the chat and they will be acknowledged that way. If you are comfortable with your question being voiced aloud, then you will be on the recording. Otherwise, it will only be the board members and the staff who were on the recording to protect your anonymity and your safety in all of this. So from here, I invite our two board members, Avery and Kate, to take it away.
Thank you, Jessie. My name is Kate DeVoli. My pronouns are they, them, and I am co-moderator of More. Sorry, were you muting me for reasons?
Oh, sorry, it was a mistake.
Oh, okay. I am co-moderator of More Light Presbyterians. I am also a ruling elder at my home congregation of 6th Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, hello, I'm Avery Arden. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the chair of programming for More Light, and I live in Georgia. I do a lot of freelance ministry around trans theology and disability theology mostly. Yeah, welcome. Shall we take it away?
Yeah, we have some basic information to share. We're going to share also a little bit about our personal stories, and then it will be time for the, we hope, rich and useful Q&A section.
Indeed.
Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You can go ahead and start.
Okay.
With what we're talking about with yeah.
Okay. So we're going to use several sets of terms. Non-monogamy and polyamory are contrasted here as umbrella terms that describe collections of the way people make relationships with each other. So in non-monogamy, that is a relationship structure where one or more partners are not sexually and or romantically exclusive to each other with every partner's consent. So that is transparent and honest. And polyamory is similar, but it often emphasizes the romantic and or committed rather than casual nature of those relationships. But these are just sort of the best practices definitions. It is not a universal accepted way to use these terms. There can be fluidity in how people run their relationships where it's a little bit this and a little bit that and a little bit something else. So take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Um, So we said that for it to be, ethical non-monogamy, for it to be polyamory, that we're expanding sort of exclusivity, right? Um, but in what areas are we talking about when we say exclusive and committed? And this is something that all relationships, even friendships and coworkers, like all relationships have in common. The thing is, usually with non-monogamy, we have to think about it more because society doesn't give us a blueprint and there's also more people involved. But with all relationships, you know, we might come in with a lot of assumptions about what it means to be committed, what counts as cheating, and what we assume might actually not be the same exact thing that our partner assumes or anyone else assumes. Um, for instance, talking about being exclusive sexually, does watching porn or masturbating by yourself count as cheating? For some monogamous people, yes. For many monogamous people, no. Emotional, how deep or how physical can your friendships get before there's a concern about that breaking your monogamous relationship? There's also social spheres of just again, like who do you spend most of your time with? How do you manage your time? And then practical things, whom do you live with? Whom do you share finances with? Those sort of elements of relationship. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Kate?
No, you're good.
Okay. Um, yeah, just to name that, in many ways, when we're looking at different sorts of relationships, we're asking the same questions, right? Which is where I wanted to bring up the idea of two terms that have to do with sort of social norms that you might not know you hold, right? That unless you have to think about it, you often don't. How do you dig up and examine a belief you hold if you don't even know you have it? You might have heard of heteronormativity, right? The sort of presumption that everyone is straight until they say otherwise. These are sort of on following the same um, sort of concept with mononormativity is the assumption that monogamy is more healthy and more natural than ethical non-monogamy. Um, and also sort of the idea that every like that your monogamous, married or not relationship, that your sexual and romantic relationship is sort of above all others in your life, that it takes priority over all other relationships, which is how mononormativity goes hand in hand with another term that was coined by Elizabeth Brake, amatonormativity, amato coming from like the word for love in Latin, the widespread assumption that everyone is better off in an exclusive, romantic, long-term coupled relationship, and that everyone is seeking such a relationship, right? For me, this brings in um, friends of mine who are aromantic and asexual. When I first was learning about polyamory, I kind of assumed it was like the opposite of being aromantic because instead of no, not looking for any romance, you're looking for a lot of romance. But in many ways, they're the two sides of the same coin, in that both polyamory and aromanticism are questioning our assumptions about privileging that one single monogamous relationship. Both are sort of questioning the language we use. Like my other half talking about like finding the one who completes me. Why do we privilege romantic relationships over friendships? Is that actually a faithful way to hold relationships? Um, and yeah, I think the bad fruit of both these forms of normativity is a lot of people feel pressured by both social structures and legal structures to enter into and maintain a monogamous relationship, even if that relationship begins to harm you, right? That legal structures privilege married monogamous folks. So, okay, I'll get married, and whoa, now I share all my finances with this person that I would like to leave, and it's really hard for me to disentangle myself from them. Um, Another like bad fruit, like I said, is we're sort of implicitly devaluing our friendships and family relationships if we put romance and above all other forms of love and relationship, um, which leads into what polyamory even means. Um, one resource on the topic of spirituality and polyamory is Love Beyond Monogamy. How polyamory can enrich your spirituality, faith, and relationships by Brian G. Murphy. Um, he was raised Christian, is now Jewish, and also sort of structures the book in a way that it can be helpful for folks wherever you are religiously or spiritually, which I appreciate. But he talks about how polyamory, when you break it apart, means many and love. Um, so he kind of says, in the most literal definition of the word, everyone is polyamorous. We all have many loves. Whether or not you identify as polyamorous largely rests on how and when you count those loves. So this isn't me saying like, oh, everyone should identify as polyamorous. No, but it's sort of, again, it's when we start questioning what relationships are held in the highest regard, um, and sort of realizing that all forms of love sort of like can be viewed on an equal field instead of putting them in a hierarchy. You can start to think about different forms of love in new ways. For example, no one thinks that a parent's love is divided in two when the second child is born. Love can multiply when new love is added into the mix. That's something that a lot of polyamorous people realize as we gain new loves is this very thing that the love doesn't sort of like get split in half, but it keeps growing. And that's definitely something that people in other forms of relationship, like parents with children, realize as well. Um, Anything you want to add, Kate?
No, thank you.
Okay. One last slide on sort of the basic 101 is a potential new perspective of monogamy and non-monogamy as more of a spectrum instead of them being like an on-off switch of two opposites. Don't take too seriously where I place the different labels on the spectrum. It depends on the person. Like we were saying, definitions are very fluid. But of course, if you have over on the left side, monogamous. Traditional monogamy is two people, usually a man and a woman, who are married to each other. Serial monogamy is if you only date one person at a time, but you are dating a lot, right? That you get into a relationship and when it ends, you get into another. Um, Polyfidelity is a polyamorous relationship that is closed. So it's there's romance and or sex happening between more than two people, but they're not seeking new members to add to that relationship, right? It's closed. Um, I'll skip a few of those. The one I wanted to name, well, solo polyamory I'll mention is if you're single and you're happy being single, and so you're having a lot of casual relationships, like that's solo polyamory. But relationship anarchy is the one that I personally am most interested in. It's saying that it's the one that is largely questioning why are we privileging sexual and romantic relationships anyway, right? What if we stopped trying to put things in hierarchies altogether? Um, so yeah, that's some basic 101. Um, and then we get to what's that have to do with church, right? Um, Kate, would you like to share, like to
Sure.
do this part? Yeah.
Importantly, you already know polyamorous people. If you think you don't, you are in a situation where the polyamorous people in your life have not disclosed that to you or have not used that word to describe their situation to you.
No.
Out of US adults, there are currently in a relationship, there are 23% that are non-monogamous to some degree. 20% of single adults in the USA reported having been in an ethically non-monogamous relationship at some point. 32% reported that their ideal relationship is non-monogamous to some degree. It's even higher for people under 30.
Yeah, one study for the under 30s, nearly half of the people said that when they imagine their ideal relationship, it's some flavor of non-monogamous, which is pretty high. It's one of those things like a lot of um, sort of non-traditional relationship structures that break the status quo is increasing, most likely as people have access to more information, and you can find some spaces where the stigma is less. More people are going to be able to live into this thing.
And lastly, the reality of or desire for polyamory is largely equal across all races, ethnicities, genders, classes, political affiliations. I want to highlight one other thing, which is that the incidence of polyamory or non-monogamy, as it's described in these statistics, is double that of what queer identification is in the broad population.
Mm.
And in the younger populations, they are nearly synonymous. Like, it is possible, it almost more people who are young are identifying as queer. So those two, like, the incidence is similar of some sort of non-monogamy identification or desire and some sort of flavor of queer. But that does not mean that all queer people are interested in non-monogamy.
Yeah, no. Um, yeah, absolutely. I think that was it for that, for those slides.
So um, we want to talk about how identifying as or living under the constraints of non-monogamous or non-monogamy does create vulnerability in those people. So people who are polyamorous are a vulnerable population. There is stigma. Various stereotypes abound about what is and is not happening with or is appropriate for relationships. And it causes rifts in families and friendships. The lack of legal protection for relationships that are not a marriage means that people can and do get fired for being polyamorous. People can and do lose custody battles for being polyamorous, and they cannot protect well their families from the normal problems that happen with a well litigated divorce. There's no way to legally formalize relationships with multiple partners. There's no protections in the case of a death of a partner. Guardianship over kids is not trivial. And so all of these things are stressors and difficulties and systemic oppressions that are suffered by people who are living like this.
Yeah, and for me, noting that when asking like what does this have to do with churches or with being faithful Christians, in my opinion, that churches that aim to work for justice for all marginalized groups need to pay attention to polyamory, whether you're ready or not to sort of jump fully on board, at least doing educational work, learning more is necessary because you might notice a lot of these vulnerabilities are quite similar to ones that the queer community faces or has faced in the past, might potentially face again in some time in the near future. Um, and so, yeah, just learning more. I wanted to name just a few of the stereotypes that abound. Um, One of the stats on the last page is that polyamory, whether it's actually practiced or people reported a desire for a non-monogamous relationship, that being pretty much equal across different demographics. One of the big stereotypes for polyamory is either like it's all rich white hippies or it's all like unemployed people. And that, of course, is treated as a moral flaw. More stereotypes are that like we're all obsessed, it's only about sex. And again, that is treated like a moral flaw. Um, and then other stereotypes are um, that we're naturally going to have more cheating or more jealousy or more toxic relationships, that polyamory always ends terribly. And it's very much a matter of when you are part of a group that is misunderstood or minoritized or stigmatized, the bad things that happen like among individuals in your group are going to be lifted up as if it's about all the group, right? So if you've heard a story about one polyamorous relationship that ended horrifically, and then you decide, oh wow, I guess that's just how polyamory is. But then you hear about so many monogamous relationships that end horribly, right? Like something like 45% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. Which is fine, but right, if you're not applying the same thing, right, that you're saying, oh, I guess that's just monogamy is inherently doomed, right, there might be something to sort of when it comes to the normativity there to wonder, wait a second, is that all polyamorous relationships, or is it just the ones that verify an implicit bias about polyamorous people, if that makes sense? Um, yeah. And then finally, polyamory and scripture, which I very much enjoy talking about, um, is, well, first of all, the question, right, of, oh, sure, either like, well, is polyamory in the Bible or not? No, but neither is modern day conceptions of monogamy. Biblical polygamy and polygable monogamy, biblical monogamy do not like that. Those the structures of these ancient times don't look like any of our relationship structures today. Ancient marriage was an economic agreement treating women as property, and ideally, that is not how we see any form of relationship today, right? Um, so just the answer is no, it's not really in the Bible. And at the same time, yes, we do see a lot of different relationship structures in the Bible, right? There are different, um, there are there are figures who are like only one partner or spouse, etc., is named, and then there are people who, like, I mean, Solomon, as an extreme case, had what, 700 or 1,000 wives. So lots of different structures, but none of them are quite like any of the relationship structures we have today. Um, and at the same time, we might still look for scripture that can help us build a sexual or romantic relationship ethic, um, drawing from the wisdom of scripture without sort of taking a copy and paste approach to the structures in it. Um, and for me, one place I see sort of polyamorous resonances, you don't have to agree with me that it's necessarily polyamory, but there's definitely resonance here that it is relatable, in my opinion, to some polyamorous folks, is the story of the book of Ruth. So we start with Ruth and Naomi, who after who they are mother and daughter-in-law, and after um Naomi's sons, so Ruth, one of her, like her husband is one of those sons, the men all die, and it would make more sense for Naomi to go on home to Bethlehem and for Ruth as a Moabite to stay in Moab so she doesn't become a very stigmatized foreigner. The Moabites were highly stigmatized, and there were stereotypes about Moabite women in particular being sort of like these seductresses. It would be dangerous for Ruth to go join Naomi in Bethlehem, but she insists. She says the famous words that are sometimes used in marriage vows, right? She makes her own commitment vows about how wherever you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Um,
And those were, in fact, in my marriage vows.
Me too. Me too. Me too. Which, yeah, like that is a beautiful commitment. And you like this is a queer relationship, even leaving sex and romance out of it, to have women in the ancient world prioritizing their relationships with each other instead of their relationships with men was a very queer thing to do, and it was a very risky thing to do, which we see throughout the book of Ruth, um, that they are in a really precarious position. Um, and in order, again, like talking about how a lot of polyamorous relationships don't have the legal protections, this is true of Ruth and Naomi, their relationship. They don't have legal protections because they're not tied to a man. And so they decide to work within the structure that existed, and get themselves a man to protect them. And that's Boaz. And long story short, Boaz sort of proves himself to be an honorable man in redeeming Ruth and Naomi. He marries Ruth, and they have this child who will go on to be, I think, the grandfather of David. Um, but I kind of see their relationship as three people co-parenting, right? Um, Regardless of, again, whatever romance or sex is going on in their relationships, especially like Naomi and Boaz are relatives, so like leaving that out of it, the structure is very co-parenty in that Naomi is explicitly named as being one of the guardians of this baby, um that she nurses, or at least that it says she held him to his breast, she became his guardian. So the three of them are co-parenting together. And so again, the resonance there. What do we find in this relationship? We see the this commitment that all of us can learn from, right? And over time, it sort of starts with between Ruth and Naomi coming up with a plan to sort of get Boaz to agree. They think they need to seduce him. No, he's willing anyway. So they kind of learn together, like, oh, we don't need to rely on subterfuge. This guy is here, like he's going to help us. So it becomes an honest communication. Everyone knows why everyone else is sort of doing what they're doing, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's one place that you can look to in scripture. Um, and then polyamory and God in general. So um, the theology around the Trinity, to me, you can have fun with, and almost talk about a God who is promiscuous. Because what does promiscuous mean? It means basically in favor of mixing, right? And that is very true of God. God is constantly, right? Jesus is the shepherd with many flocks. We are described in Ephesians as brides of Christ, all of us, regardless of gender. The Spirit blows wherever she will, is something Jesus says, that there's this idea that the divine, and we see it throughout the Hebrew Bible too, that the divine is constantly moving in places where people don't expect to find the divine. Whether that's in for people of the the Jewish people being surprised to find the divine at work among Gentiles, or men being surprised to find God at work among women, that God is constantly spreading themselves all over the place, including where you wouldn't expect. And then one of the metaphors for the Trinity, or I don't know if metaphor is the right term, but language that some use for the Trinity instead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Some have said the lover, the beloved, and love itself, which is beautiful. It also sort of implies this relationship within the Trinity, right? That the three of them together form their own sort of complete relationship, that then they choose to have that love overflow into all of creation, which to me is beautiful. Also, that language is not like new. The idea of calling the Trinity the lover, the beloved, and love itself is not new. One of my favorite sort of language for the Trinity, Bernard of Clairvaux, who called himself a bride of Christ and talked of his mystical marriage to Christ. But he used the idea of that the Trinity is the one who kisses, the one who receives the kiss, and the kiss itself. So very similar concept there. But yeah, just thinking about God as this being who breaks through all our structures and norms to be love everywhere. And then one of my I if you can't tell, I'm very into saints. I am Catholic as well as Presbyterian. And one of my favorites is Madre Juana de la Cruz. Not to be confused with another very cool saint, Sor Juana de la Cruz, who lived in Mexico around the same time. But this Juana lived in Spain during the 1500s, aka during the Spanish Inquisition. She was one of the only women who wasn't stopped from, like, who was permitted to um, share her theology broadly. She probably couldn't write herself, but she would preach, and it was written down. Um, she also, a lot of her story is very queer. She would point to her Adam's apple and say, like, oh, I was like in the womb, I was male, but Mary wanted me to be a nun for her order, so Christ made me female. So we have this sort of gender fluid story. And she's constantly talking about the mixing of genders in every person, that all of us have the feminine and masculine, and that leads into her theology of what heaven looks like. She has this vision of heaven as where there are streets lined with marriage beds, just every which way, every direction you look, there are marriage beds, and in each bed there are two people. There's God or Jesus and a saint, either male, like regardless of gender, that these saints are male and female, etc. And God is in bed with every one of them. And for her, that very much there was the implied she is intentionally bringing in this sort of erotic imagery to describe how close humanity and divinity mingle in heaven. So yeah, even just looking to the Middle Ages, we see this example of what is essentially polyamory, where you see it in the modern day too, with people talking about their personal relationship with Jesus that some of us kind of scoff at, but for some people it's very meaningful. The idea of like Jesus is my boyfriend. Oh, well, if he's your boyfriend and he's my boyfriend, then I guess he's polyamorous, right? Yeah. So that's just some theology. Kate, did you want to add any theology before we move on to our stories?
Just one thing that one of um the things I touch on when I teach about this is that love comes in many forms, not all of which are romantic. And so, like the comparison that we were making about how no one thinks that two children, well, like when the older sibling gets, or the younger sibling gets born, that love is divided. And nobody thinks that you love your kid and somehow then don't love your spouse.
Mm,
Um, but there are absolutely um, people who take exception to the idea that romantic love should be similar.
mm,
And there are people who are just monogamous. That is how they are. They only fall in love once. If they fall, like, if that person isn't available anymore, either they die or they get divorced or something happens, they just don't fall in love again.
mm,
Um, and there are people who fall in love all the time, but are committed to doing nothing about that except feeling that feeling. And I would say that the second example, falls under some kind of non-monogamy, but not in practice, right? So the question of like, what do you desire and what do you do don't always completely line up. Um, for theology, this may matter. So there is a famous historical example, and I allude to this a little bit on the interview that I did with Avery on their podcast about my story, of Karl Barth having had a lifelong, mostly lifelong, adult life relationship where he was madly in love, it seems, from the letters, with his co-theologian and secretary, Charlotte von Kirschbaum. He was also married, and his wife Nellie was not fond of that arrangement, at least at the beginning. She was writing to her parents saying, "This seems weird. I don't know what's going on. You keep saying, my mother keeps saying we should get divorced, but I don't think I want to." But there's no evidence that people have found that theologian Karl Barth ever had any physical relationship with this woman he was writing love letters to, despite her being like in the same train cabin as him, for a long, long time. It may have been important to him that he didn't. It may be that they did have a physical relationship that is none of our business. But ultimately, that what happened was a family. The children of Nellie and Carl had Charlotte buried next to Nellie, per Nellie's request as well, that all three of them were raising children together, and the children absolutely considered all three of them parents. And whatever was like rough times in the beginning when these letters were going out from Nellie to her parents seems to have settled into something functional and something where at least the children were thriving and happy about it. We don't have the theological wrestling that Dr. Bart may or may not have done on the subject, but we do have um, some fruits of that relationship to look at. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that just really that hones in on this idea that like you'd be surprised how many non-monogamous people you already know or possibly admire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings us into our stories. I'll just share really quick because I won't take long. Kate's is much more interesting. But I think it helps to hear different stories to get this idea of how non-monogamy looks very different for different people. For me, I have my wife. We've been married since 2019. We started dating in 2014, and we kind of like grew up together. Like we met when we were 18, and like our whole adult lives, like we went through the sort of angst of figuring out being queer together, figuring out where we wanted to go in life. And like she is like, ugh, she's wonderful. I love my wife. She's like, I wouldn't want to spend my life with like if I couldn't spend my life with her, I'd be very sad. Um, we've been polyamorous, like in theory, since before we got married. We've always talked about sort of crushes we've had, and we've had this sort of like idea of like if for either of us we start to develop feelings for someone else and it's requited, um, we'll talk about, we'll come to each other and communicate about it, talk through what that could look like, but we will probably like allow each other to pursue that. Um, but neither of us goes many places where that kind of thing really happens. We're kind of homebodies. So it never sort of became something that happened in practice until just last August, I met someone online that I mean, we talked online for ages before it became more romantic. But when it did, and I talked to Leah about it, my wife, to sort of see what she thought, and she encouraged me to to sort of pursue it, see if this person liked me back, which um he did. And so we actually just celebrated this person and I, Cedar, celebrated our 1 year anniversary yesterday, which is cool and makes me happy. And it's been a really good year. Um, and I feel like different forms of polyamory get stigmatized in different ways. And I do think that there's a stigma. I think some people can wrap their head around polyamory, that is the polyfidelity. Okay, it's a triad. It's three people who all are interested in each other. All three of them are together in this romance thing. Some people can say, okay, that's close enough to monogamy that I get it. But um, things like casual dating, sometimes people are like, well, no, that's bad. Or like for my case, I have a romantic relationship with my wife and with Cedar. They are not romantic with each other, but they have become very good friends. We play D&D together, which has helped with bonding a lot. Um, and it really the idea that polyamory has things to teach all people about all sorts of relationships is um like after I had my first like kind of like in-person date with Cedar, and then I went home and checked in with my wife about it. Like she talked about how she felt closer to me than before because we had to do that communication to make sure everyone was on the same page. Um, and so it's been like it's enriched my marriage. It has not made it worse, and there is no sense of coercion, because I think a lot of people assume that like, oh, your wife doesn't really want you to have a boyfriend. She's just saying that to be nice. No, she's the one who kind of didn't push me into it, but like was like, yeah, go out there, go do it.
Like cheerleading, yeah.
Yeah, like yes, do it. And so like yeah, it's been really lovely. And I'm fairly new to it, but it's been going really well. And yeah, keep learning things all the time. And that's all I'll say.
If you want to hear like 3 hours of me talking about my situation, you can listen to that Spotify or that podcast interview. The shorter version is I am married. My wife and I have been together for 28 years. We've been married for 20 of those. And for the last 15, we have also been in a relationship with another partner. Our like shared girlfriend. We are cohabitating. We are raising children together. That is really hard. I do not recommend starting a new relationship with an infant, but I do recommend having more than two parents. That was worth it. Absolutely, 100%. We all also have other partners who are not each other, who are not partnered with any of the other ones of us. This is the kind of thing where, like, if we had a whiteboard, maybe drawing some lines between some geometric figures would help. And we're, after like 15 years together, we are pretty sure that we are committed. We cannot get all three of us married. I think we would if we could. And it's hard, like, in the initial period where said infant was around and the all three of us trying to live together relationship was getting started, none of the sets of our parents were happy about this arrangement. They were all very concerned for us, but also for the grandkids, because they had no model to compare to about how this would ever work. They had no story to point to be like, yes, this ends happily ever. And after it took a long time, it took like 5 years, but now all three sets of grandparents are all alive and are all on board enthusiastically in support of this relationship. And it's entirely because they have seen the fruits of it. They have seen how happy and thriving our kids are, how unstressed we all are. We have different stresses, but like the normal things that an only two-parent household has to deal with are not those things that we're stressed about. And they have seen us treat each other with respect and care. There were concerns about, hey, two of you have a legal marriage, the third one does not. How are you going to provide for that person? How are you going to make sure that, like, let's get everything legal set up so that she's named as a beneficiary? We had to go to a lawyer to get what's called a continuing custody agreement, where we didn't give up parental rights for the various children, but described how they are being shared among all these people who have demonstrated a life full of taking care of those children. None of this was a secret about my life when I started the ordination process in the PCUSA. I didn't like write down though on my application, like raising my hand and going, this may be a concern of yours. You might want to stop this right now. So I knew it was going to come up at some point. I didn't expect it to be super early, but it was super early. I'd had 2 seminary classes at that point. When the Commission on Preparation for Ministry said, we need to have a conversation about this. I did end up getting dismissed, but in the conversation about dismissing me, I was allowed to come in when someone made a motion to dismiss me, and talk about why it is that I think I should continue in the process, like say something for yourself. And I gave a speech that outlined some of the theology behind why I thought it was okay. And I didn't really use that time to be like, I'm in the Bible. There's Ruth and Naomi who are just like this. Or to say, it's important to love even vulnerable people like me. And how dare you toss me out? You're clearly not doing that if you do. Instead, I made a statement of faith. I talked about how the God that I love models the way I'm trying to love. Being someone who loves promiscuously, who does not give up on commitments that are made previously when something shiny and new and also rewarding and good comes along. And that all of the ways that I could respond to this love that were faithful involved me staying married and staying in this third relationship as well. I was still dismissed, but it did take them a while to decide to do that. It was not like a foregone conclusion. The conversation was apparently informative. I wasn't allowed to be in the room for it. Since having done that interview with Avery, I have been asked a number of times, hey, is this just you? Or are there other people out there who have been dismissed from the process or charges brought up against them? There have been people with charges brought up against them since, but as far as I know, I'm still the only person to have been dismissed, the first and only, from the PCUSA ordination process just for being openly polyamorous. But what I answer people when they ask me that question is, I have to believe there are more people like me. I can't be the only, like statistically, I really can't be the only one out there, but it's really difficult for people who are in the process or have gone through it already and ordained to be honest about that. There are significant privileges that come with attaching yourself to the monogamy arrangement, that it may be just too difficult to step away from. Like it's possible people could be defrocked. It's possible that they could have charges brought up against them besides, which means no more access to like insurance benefits, no more access to like the Board of Pensions, and that all of the student loan money that you took out to go to seminary, you won't necessarily be able to pay back. And so there's a huge financial burden because of that. I think we can start answering and asking questions. We did get a number of questions just on the registration forms. So while things are coming into the chat, I wanted to ask Avery if there were any of those you wanted to start out with addressing.
And before you all go into question and answer, just so you all know, we usually end at the hour mark, but this has been so rich that we are just now getting to Q&A. So if you need to leave at the hour mark, please know that that's okay. We are going to record the Q&A portion, as I said at the beginning. If you do not want your voice or your face to be on camera, please put your question in the chat. Kate and Avery will acknowledge those questions without acknowledging your name. And your question, if you need to leave, your question can be answered and it will be in the recorded portion. So again, if you don't want yourself to be on camera or your voice to be on camera, please put your question in the chat. And if you need to leave, all of this will be recorded and shared with you. So Kate and Avery, back to you.
I have one more thing. There were a couple of questions about the overture that is coming up. We will have a whole other educational session next month, second Monday of the month. More Light Monday will focus specifically on this overture. So we won't answer questions about the overture because that's for next time. So join us.
And if you have questions that aren't general, but are very specific to just me or just Avery, you can send them to the More Light Presbyterians contact information link. Is it just info@mlp.org?
Hello
Hello.
at mlp.org.
Hello at mlp.org. And the Director of Engagement and Director of Operations will get those questions to us.
Yeah. Yeah, so looking at the sheet, I think two of the questions that we could sort of answer at the same time. How do we address / hold space for conversations about this faithful inclusion with congregations who are uninformed and afraid of change? Actually, no, let's start with that. That's a whole thing on its own. Do you want to start, Kate?
This is a question that we get asked about every uncomfortable topic. It's not just this one. And the skills to be able to do it are the same for every uncomfortable topic. Having, So before I give the like pithy awkward answer, let me name what some of those things are that you're already doing. Have an adult education hour, have a book club, do things that are extremely Presbyterian, that are tools that we are used to using for holding space. You can always invite myself or Avery to come guest preach. If there are things that you want to have like conversations stirred up about, we are like semi-professional side hustler stirrers. More Light Presbyterians in general are happy to send our board members and our staff to come do guest preaching with you. But also, people tend to not want to engage with uncomfortable topics or have faithful conversations about things instead of just opinions and then sort of walk out of the room. They don't want to do that until someone they love is invested. So if you are asking this as a faith leader in your community, and you're thinking, this is the next thing, I want to be prepared, I want to prepare my people, that may not be as important as having like something in your back pocket for when, not if, someone in your congregation asks, well, do you do marriages for 3 people? Because we have 3 people. Like, don't just say no, bring it to session and say no. Have something planned for when, like the biggest question we get actually, for More Light Presbyterians on this topic is from people who are in that situation, like from pastors or from clerks of session, lay leaders, who are asking things like, I have a funeral I need to run, and there's like 2 widowers. How do I arrange the receiving line? Like really practical concerns that are also very pastoral. So think about what you will do when you have to run that funeral. Keep a hold of some news clippings, things like that. Do you have things to add, Avery?
Yeah, I added it in the chat, but if you want a book club book, I really enjoy Love Beyond Monogamy. Um, he talks about all the forms of non-monogamy, which includes things like casual sex, so you know your congregation best, whether that's something that would just shut them down immediately or not. Um, MLP.org now has, if you click on the programming tab, you will find a resources tab, which has some polyamory resources, so you could check that out for more options. But yeah, I think if your church has already done work, especially on embracing like queer and trans people, you can you can follow a similar roadmap. Um, I think one of the biggest things is to emphasize love and that like we care more about human beings than policies, right? Um, like Kate, I deeply respect the fact that when you had that chance to like defend yourself, um, before you were dismissed from ordination, that you spent that time not going through all the apologetics, but just sort of giving your statement of faith and naming things like that. Because when we get too tangled up, like there's a place for that, right? Like when talking about queer theology, we do often start from the place of, okay, here's what this verse in the Bible says, and here's why, like how other interpretations for it, and it's not about gay people. There's a place for that. But if that's the end all be all, you're not going to be changing hearts and you're not going to be forming a space where people feel like true belonging. Um, but yeah, just sorry, now I forget what I was going to say along with that. But yeah, like just don't like when having the discussion, don't do the thing they used to do in high school debate classes where they're like, okay, today we're talking about gay marriage. And then all the people who are gay are like, oh my God, we're gonna debate my existence.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Don't turn it into a debate. Make rules and boundaries about what people are allowed to say and what is not allowed with that emphasis on love and respect. Um, yeah. Um, Next question. Do we, I think from the what people sent, the other one I think we should definitely answer is it doesn't seem like there's space yet in mainline denominations for clergy to be non-monogamous. How can clergy faithfully navigate a don't ask, don't tell sort of life? Or is that possible? Yeah. Do you want to start with that?
I think it's really hard.
Mhm.
Anytime you try to follow Jesus Christ, uh, it's hard. And I think in this case, following involves putting yourself at risk. Um, however, by coming out, by having that information be eventually shared. However, Jesus did not do that under other people's terms. He chose the time and the place and the manner of his crucifixion. Um, and I think that made for a particular kind of death that had special meaning. So if you do not want to suffer for no reason, I would advise someone trying to do this faithfully, as in with discipleship, to think about when you would like to disclose that information and what you are going to do leading up to that point to protect vulnerable people, which absolutely includes you. Um, I have other things to say, but I want to know what Avery has to say in response.
Ugh, I mean, I am not a polity person. I am not ordained. I dropped out of that for a whole variety of reasons. Um, but I think one way to, while you're living in that space of what the question asker describes as the don't ask, don't tell, um, is yeah, it's really hard. And finding your people, it's dangerous. Like I know, like there's so much danger in even trying to find your people, but find people you can talk to. We at More Light can help hook you up to those people. You don't have to do it alone. Um,
Yeah.
you're not living a lie. Like Kate was naming about Jesus, one thing I always like looking at, especially in the Gospel of Mark, is when Jesus names that he is the Son of humanity, or the Messiah, the Anointed One, is he often says, "Don't tell anyone else." Whether it's to his friends or someone he just healed, he's like, "Don't tell. It's not time yet." Um, being closeted is not sinful, and it's not your fault. It's the fault of the world that forces you into that. You're not being deceitful. You are being forced to do something that is it's the world and the church that's sinning against you when you're forced into that. And yeah, I have so much compassion for you. Um,
So great. Two other things I did want to add. One, there's a difference between a secret and something private. A secret is something that is everybody's business, but you're not telling them. And something private is only your business, and you're not telling them because that's only your business. The question for me becomes, when is my relationship somebody else's business? And for me, the shape of my family is important, particularly if I was going to be like highlighted as someone where God is operating in this person. Um, the structures of my family show something about who God is and what God wants out of the world, and that becomes other people's business. Who I'm dating is nobody's business. And so that doesn't have to be something that I felt I had to share. That said, every time I have come out, it has been a good idea. Every single time. That's not to say I've suffered no consequences, but I have helped a lot of people by being honest about who I am in a more public way. Okay, I think we're ready to take questions live if you have them.
yeah, so starting with you don't want to be anonymous, so I can say, Abby Turner, would you like to share your question
They
or
corrected
comment?
their name. Their name is actually Atticus. They were
Oh
in.
no, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
it's all good. I didn't
Oh, I
realize that
see.
my name was my old name,
Yeah, I've been
which
there.
I am perfectly fine with y'all knowing that I'm trans, so that isn't a problem. Um, but I am a open polyamorous person at my church, and I just wanted to let y'all know that I'm really appreciative of having this uh, topic discussed, especially in light of the I'm new to Presbyterians, so I'm not sure what the thing is called, but I just got like an email about it from somebody at my church. They actually just forwarded this to me for my awareness so that I could jump on at the last minute. So I am really appreciative. And I also, although I wouldn't be at church any other way, I also feel like that being out and polyamorous is a good idea every time I've done it. So
Thank you. Welcome.
Yes,
thank you.
so glad you're here. Is there anything that you would want to add, that anything that your church has done to educate or to welcome you in particular ways? Totally fine if not, but if you've got wisdom to share, you're welcome to.
Uh, my church is very progressive on the edge of things, and I I kind of brought it up as a challenge to them that I am openly polyamorous. Is that going to be a problem? Um, and they accepted that graciously and said that that wasn't going to be a problem, but that it was on the cutting edge of like ordination and stuff as an awareness factor for me. So I feel welcomed in my church because they have like a whole LGBTQ very extremely strong presence, and uh, I think I'm the only open polyamorous person in the church. Yeah,
We're gonna say you
but
are
um
for
uh
the sake of the recording.
Yeah.
but I mean I neither of my partners come to my church, so I kind of look like a single guy there. But I don't keep it a secret. So it's kind of hard to tell, but I have brought each of my partners to various church functions, so people know.
Thank you.
So I don't know. I don't really have any wisdom to share other than um, I think it's worth it to be our whole selves at church. I mean, I'm already doing that as a trans person, so just
Right?
add one more thing,
You
right?
get to do all the things. Yeah, feel that. Kate, I would before we answer another question, just Atticus bringing up some of the stuff. Can you share the anecdote about how your church responded, like to
Oh yeah, to
yeah,
my
it's so
announcement.
sweet. I
Yeah.
love it.
So my I always introduce my whole family when I introduce my family. But when our youngest was just being expected, so not my married partner, but our joint partner was pregnant with our youngest child, we announced that during the prayers of the people because it was a pass the mic kind of thing at the time. And it was a joy in the joys and concerns that we were expecting after trying. And everyone prayed blessings over us and did the thanks be to God. And then the choir ladies knit us a baby blanket. Like their response was not like, I don't understand your family, explain yourself to me. It was clearly you're going to need a baby blanket, and we know how to do that. And I think generally, church ladies are a force to be reckoned with, in that they are extremely kind and generous, much more so than I typically give them credit for, and can handle complicated topics. And they aren't really put off by something that doesn't look normal because by the time you get to their age, they've seen a lot and things have changed a lot. So mostly the responses that I've gotten have been warm and like at worst, um, the common response is at worst, I don't understand that, but you're going to need a baby blanket. So here you go.
So real. Um, Someone else in the comments said, please discuss polyamory versus polygamy. Would the next push be for polygamy, even though it's not legal? Um, well, do you want to tackle that? If not, I can, but
Couple things. Uh, Polyamory does not, like explicitly does not expect a relationship that's going on to end in full lifetime commitment with financial entanglement forever and ever. Polygamy sort of does, that there's going to be multiple people who are contractually owned by someone. Usually it is an arrangement with a husband who has multiple wives for economic reasons. Um, and that is held up in some of the cultures where it happens as a goal. So a relationship matures into a marriage, and the model is only different because that marriage is allowed to include multiple people. And I think polyamory does not have that expectation, and it explicitly does not have that expectation that a relationship can be valuable if it is 2 years long, if it is 2 months long, and that it isn't failed if it doesn't result in a lifelong commitment.
Yeah. And that said though, I assume the part about would the next push be for polygamy? I assume that's the question of like,
Oh, like when I said I would be married if I could?
yeah,
Yeah. Marriage is marriage is something that the queer community has talked a lot about. Particularly ahead of
right.
Obergefell about like, do we want marriage actually though? Do
Yeah,
we? And the consensus was yes, because it's an extremely convenient legal mechanism that protects vulnerable people.
yeah.
Yes, we absolutely do want marriage to exist, even if we as individual couples do not pursue it.
Mhm.
Um, so civilly, it may be appropriate to have either marriage or some analogous thing be available to protect vulnerable people who are involved in raising families in particular, but also, from being fired from their jobs or other arrangements based on this identity. Um, Religiously is a whole other question.
I do
Um,
like the idea of having some like if you have some polyamorous folks who would like to make some sort of spiritual commitment to each other, I think that's lovely. And I personally like think that's something churches could provide, somewhat similar to when trans folks want to have their new name celebrated with a sort of an actual ceremony. Like I think there are so many ways that we can find ways to like create ritual and ceremony because that's something that's deeply meaningful to humans, um to celebrate all the different things, and to name the sacredness that is everywhere, that and especially like sometimes in things that are not upheld as sacred typically are sort of denied their holiness. um
it is a bold thing for a congregation to say, God blesses this arrangement. And the
yeah,
vows that you make to each other in front of God and all of us matter.
exactly.
And you can do that in a way that does not end with, and I pronounce you married.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the things I love about non-monogamy is that it has you questioning like, okay, is marriage the end all be all for all people? And like what commitments do I want to make to actually have the conversation? Um, and like you're saying, that doesn't always mean like forever and ever, right? That but as long as everyone is on the same page, can figure it out. But anything else with that?
Can I jump in as just
Yeah,
as a smart
Jesse.
labor? I want to say as well, just from the context of what's going to be the next thing that is pushed kind of situation. Um, I would discourage us from looking at things of like what's the next issue we have to tackle. At More Light Presbyterians, we believe that our flourishing is intersectional and interconnected, and that in order for liberation to occur, we all must be liberated and we all must flourish. So it's not sort of this Miss Rachel-esque, what's in the box? Oh, it's polyamory. Oh, it's transgenderism. Oh, it's this or that. It's everything and all of it all at once. And until all of us are liberated and flourishing and thriving, then we're going to be here for all of it and everything. But that's not to say that we know what's coming next. And it's not to say that this is going to be what we tackle, because at More Light, we believe that our voice is needed on every topic. Whether or not we release a statement on it or whether or not we come to the floor of GA, we don't know, because that's something we discern together as a body. But as far as the denomination, who knows where they're coming next? Claudia.
And I will just say the concept of contractual monogamy, as in marriage, is a deeply Western thing. So we can have a whole other session on the colonization of relationships and how in cultures there's polyandry and that is legal. And culture, like, so it is a very Western thing, and imposing it on bodies is a very colonizing idea. So I will just keep it at that. But also, I want to acknowledge that someone asked a question about what is in the Book of Order being used in situations where polyamory is being tried. And there is actually one document that is not in the Book of Order that has been used. It's a 1997 document that it is, I don't remember the name of the thing, but if you give me a minute, I will put it in the chat later on. But this document is about kind of like the baseline of how we are supposed to live as ministers. And it is specific towards ministers. And it was a document that was drafted for PCUSA staff. And then it got the recommendation of like, you can apply this in your presbyteries. And then it went really rogue. And the thing is, this document has not been updated since 1997, but our polity and our Book of Order have. So it still uses the language of chastity and singleness and fidelity in marriage. It still uses heterosexual relationships as the only way, legal way, to exist. So, this document is what some presbyteries have used in their trials, because there are people, someone asked about how to live faithfully. Well, some people have lived faithfully and have come out as polyamorous, like clergy people. Sadly, because this is still a stigma, because they were women, at least the ones I know about, and we need to talk about gender bias as well and gender identity bias. Things didn't really go well for them. But they lived authentically as themselves. And like one of them, I think, has kept their credentials. One of them is still wonky. So I will look for this document, shut up, and let the conversation go. But I will put the name of the document in the chat.
Someone asks, what are some of the ethics of non-monogamy? So for my final project in the ethics class I took at seminary, I wrote a curriculum on the Christian sexual ethics, queer sexual ethics, that is Christian. And it has a section about what is queer sexual ethics. And polyamory or non-monogamy is queer, even though it isn't a gender thing and isn't a sexual orientation thing. It is, in my opinion, still one of the flavors of queer because it is non-normative, and it is particularly, like, it does undermine the fabric of society in extremely good and healthy ways. Because it has us question what it is we actually want and how can people be healthy together and not just correct together. And so when I wrote that curriculum, I described what makes something ethical, like what is an ethic, as including all of the things that you would see at the end of the world. Like when the eschaton completes and we are in the after times, you have everything is revealed. So it's apocalyptic. You have everyone is honest. There's no hiding who you are, or your desires are all like perfectly aligned. And it is I forget the third one. I need to look it up. Those two things though, like transparency and honesty. Oh, safe was the other one. So like really interested in people's safety, emotional, physical, medical. And I think non-monogamy, because it forces conversations that are normally not had, um, does a good job of upholding those ethics. Did you want to add anything, Avery? Or should we have another question?
Let's have another question. Um, Sorry, now I'm looking at the questions. I think we and a lot of these we referenced in our lecture at the beginning. Um, so that's why, yeah, a lot of people wanting to know more about the overture, which yes, will be in June discussion. Um,
So there was a question in the pre thing, like the registration time,
mhm.
that was hinting at like, how do I communicate to people that I am a safe person to disclose their full truth to? Which is like, if you say, I know these people, but they haven't told me, how can I get them to tell me? Um, there are like more or less direct or indirect ways to do that. You can force the conversation, like I was saying, with like bring someone to talk about it and say, this is on my mind. I'm very curious. I would love to know if anyone in my life is doing that. You can also have a private conversation where you mention that you went to this talk and that you were, surprised to find that you didn't completely disagree with it, or
Mhm.
confirmed to know that it is possible to love people well and ethically in ways that are not the traditional structures.
Yeah, or you
And
could repost our statement that we put out today on our
mhm,
on social media for another one.
yep. Um, you could also just say so in casual conversation.
Yeah. Hmm.
Avery, Atticus has their hand raised.
Oh, Atticus, go for it.
Sorry.
You could also find a little polyamory flag pin and pin it to yourself.
You could. That's nice and subtle.
Then we have to ask which of the flags. Sorry.
Yeah, there are a number.
I
There are a number.
I prefer the more modern one, but
There's
I'm oh, is there more than one more modern one?
I
Have I
don't
fallen
know.
behind?
Like within the last decade, yes. I like the heart with the infinity.
Yeah, the heart with the infinity
Yeah.
is cool.
Yeah. That one I feel like it's the idea across more than any of the particular colors.
I feel like I did not say
My
very
per
much about the difficulties that one encountered, like the unique difficulties that might be encountered in polyamory. So, like, if
Sure.
you are someone who wants to try to counsel people who are going through a hard time, you may want to be aware that there are the usual problems, but there's also unusual problems. Um, Jealousy doesn't disappear for people who are partnered with multiple people. It's just, sometimes it gets processed instead of buried. Um, and it may, like, my love is infinite, but my time is not infinite. And so the difficulties of deciding how it is I'm going to spend the time that I want to spend with all of these people that I love, which sounds like, oh no, what a difficult problem to have. But it really can be heartbreaking, when when your kid's graduation with one partner is happening, while the other one goes into labor. Like, that was hard.
Did that happen?
That
Oh
absolutely
no.
happened. Um,
Oh.
so uh li lives can't all happen in the same place at the same time. And getting just a, that's hard for you. I'm sorry. Would you like a coffee from your loving church member, friend, or your pastor means a lot.
And I think it's important that we recognize that allyship is important. Also, obviously, it's important, but so is the ability to talk in community with those who are also going through the same things or similar things that you are going through. And one of the things that has come to more light frequently, especially within the last year or so, is this need for community. And so we've been taking very seriously all of those concerns and this desire to cultivate community. And so we're doing this in a very safe and protected kind of way. But if it's something that you are interested in and being part of a community that can talk about polyamory and your own polyamorous self, please email hello@mlp.org and we can be in conversation with you about how to cultivate that community. Myself and Kate and our programming team are working very, very diligently and very hard to do that in a safe and protected way for you and for the community as a whole. So there's a both and to that as well. Um, I think Avery and Kate, we it's almost 8:30. I want to take maybe another 10 minutes or so before we wrap up, if just to be respectful of time. So just keep that in your mind. And if you have more questions, please feel free to email them and we'll get back to you directly.
Sure. I think 10 minutes is maybe more than we need, but
Mhm.
doesn't seem like there's like 80 questions in the chat that we
Yeah,
need to get to.
yeah. I feel like a few of the comments, if anyone is interested in seeing more people's thoughts on polygamy and that kind of thing, there are some comments that are great. I think for actual conversation, we're good on,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think we're
So
good for right now.
check the comments if you're interested. Um, Someone just added, I'm a youth pastor and I find myself having a lot of conversations about the youth questioning their identity and sexual orientation. Yep. Curious if you have any advice if when a teen brings something up about non-monogamy. I've never been in that experience. So have you, Kate?
I
Or
have. I've never
okay.
been a youth pastor, but I've had youth ever. Um, my priorities are, is this person able to tell the whole truth about who they are to someone they trust? If that's not me, they should have a someone. For someone in a youth pastor situation, I would also maybe be concerned about, are they safe? So the more partners you add, the more risk you add, both for heartbreak, which is really, I think, the primary concern, um, but also um, like medical needs, maybe being encouraged into relationships being more serious than they might individually like. And so when someone brings up to me that they're like, I am in the teen range and I don't know, like, what's this non-monogamy thing? My partner is suggesting we do this, or I heard about it. Do you think it makes sense for me? My like go-to response is stuff I wanted to hear when I was a teen. You can have as much or as little romance as you want, and you should have exactly that much. You can have as much or as little sex as you want within whatever is safe for you, which may be none at all. And that's okay. You need access to resources that help you decide how much you do or don't want and what kinds of things. If that's around polyamory or around non-monogamy, I would highlight the importance of transparency and honesty, saying the good thing about this structure you're naming is that it involves a lot of talking that usually doesn't happen in traditional relationships. It's good when it does, but it's a requirement in this case. So you're going to get really practiced at it. And I would, depending on the age appropriateness, like if it's a younger teen, we may just be talking about it in terms of, yeah, families take a lot of different structures. You are right now trying to figure out whether you need to be committed to one person when you're dating. Like, no, in my opinion, explore what it is that you want by having lots of relationships when you are young so that you can figure out what you want to do later. Scarletine is a great resource. Thank you, Avery, putting that in the chat.
I have to edit it. I did the wrong URL. I'll find it, but yes.
Okay. Atticus, I see your hand up.
So, one of the things that I would also say is there are toxic relationships for any form of like any configuration of relationship, but if you are not mature enough in relationships, polyamory can be one that you can find it a lot quicker. And so
How so? Like, I don't disagree, but say what you mean about mature in relationships.
being able to talk out what your boundaries are, what you are expecting, etc. Being able to talk out where you're expecting to go in a relationship, like, because there's not this patterned ladder of relationship that you're expected to go along. And so you need to be able to discuss all of those things and be able to communicate those things. And when you throw more people into the mix, it's like the requirement for communication like goes up by an order of like exponential order of magnitude. And it's not just like two people is twice the communication. It's like two people is like 10 times the communication. So because of that, you get into situations a lot faster.
And because younger people are inexperienced with relationships in general,
Exactly.
they may not be equipped to do that well yet.
Precisely. But I would encourage folks that are interested in that to be a lot more proactive about getting the education that they need in that, and having the support from a trusted adult or a trusted etc. that helps them navigate that a little better.
Thank you.
Ainsley, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, so I have worked with teens in both a church and secular setting. And one of the things that I have encountered in conversations about polyamory with teens is the issue of what is and isn't polyamory. Because now that polyamory is starting to become more well known, it's on social media, it's on the internet, they can find stuff about it. What teams are running into that comes up more than any other issue about it that I've seen is their significant others cheating on them and claiming that it's okay because they're polyamorous.
Oh yeah, no, that's lies.
Yeah, that's not polyamory. And so the first conversation you need to have is what is polyamory? That polyamory involves consent, enthusiastic consent, not coerced consent, enthusiastic, that involves communication and respect and boundaries, and that if you did not consent to be in a polyamorous relationship, your partner does not have the right to say that whatever they're doing is because they're polyamory. So I think that's a great place to start with teens, because at least in my experience, that's what's happening out there right now. I've had several teens bring that up with me. So
Thank you.
Well, friends, it's been an hour and a half. And I know that there might be more questions, so please feel free to email us at hello@mlp.org. We will connect you to the right people, to the right resources. We have a lot of great partners in ministry that do great work around this, and we have the resource page on our website. So please feel free to get in touch with us. And also, before we close in prayer, I will say we do this work, and right now we're doing all of this for free, but we cannot do it without money. So if you feel so led to donate to More Light Presbyterians, like please visit mlp.org and click on the donate button. We cannot do this without financial support. So thank you all so much.
I just put the giving link in the chat, so it's quick and easy for you to click on it.
And I would be happy to close this up in prayer unless someone else feels like super led to do this. Okay. Let us pray. Source of love, we give you thanks for the many ways in which you have loved us and for the many ways in which we can love each other. I give you thanks for Avery and Kate and their testimony and the ways in which they continue moving this denomination forward into loving all of her children. We ask that you crack our hearts open so that we may accept the things we cannot understand just because they are not what we do. And that we love the people around us with the same exuberance and the same abundance as you. For in that we will find that liberation is for all, and that love is for all, in whatever shape it takes. It is in your name we pray. Amen. All right, friends, thanks so much for joining. We'll see you next time.
Good night, y'all.